Hi, Ashwita.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. Um, Kriti, you have a question before we begin? Okay, so it's time. Welcome, first of all, to a very heavy topic for most people, death and grieving. Um, I've had a spate of people reaching out, um, you know, with grief related issues. It's not just COVID. I mean, a lot of issues this way and that. Um, and I really felt like this topic was needed because I just kept getting the same questions over and over again and hearing also the same horror stories of how these people were being treated. So I really felt that, we needed to talk about what happens during death, what happens after death, and how do we deal with losing the people that we love, and how do we help people cope with losing the people that they love. And before we start, it would be nice if more of you switched on your videos. It's just a little handful right now. It's nice, to feel like I'm talking to people. Yeah, thanks. Sure, Sonali, go ahead. You have a question? Uh, just put it in the chat if that's okay. Okay, first of all, before we begin, I just want to mention that I know I said it would be about 60 minutes, but I have a feeling we're going to take 90 minutes and a little bit, possibly a little more than that. But let's see. There's a lot of stuff that I want to cover. I didn't feel I could compress it more than 90. Um, okay, so I'll deal with that later, Sonali. Let's understand the whole thing first. I'll take that at the end. Yeah. So I want to begin with saying that I sent out a questionnaire to my groups, asking what the most popular questions were, and that's what made this whole talk come together. I had some things that I wanted to share, but thanks to almost 50 people that filled up the forms, I had some really good insight into what happens, what are the questions that people most have. So I'll take you through all of those questions one by one. There's almost like a little more than half a dozen questions. But I want to begin with, why is death scary in the first place? We don't realize that ultimately death is scary because it makes us realize that we actually have no control. See, we go through life uh, creating this illusion of control. If I have enough money, I'll be fine. If I get married, my old age is taken care of, which is such a weird myth because it doesn't have to be true at all. If I have children, somebody will take care of me in my old age. All of these strange ideas that we develop basically to create the illusion that we're safe, that nothing can go wrong. But that's hardly true because a lot of things can go wrong. So the thing is, the earth is not exactly the heavenly experience that we imagine it is. Okay. In all my experience of past life regression so far, where we go to the part before the soul was born, many of us have to be literally kicked to be born on earth. Like, we're so happy up there, we have to be pushed and kicked into these human bodies. Okay, so don't think about this whole idea that, oh my god, people are going to be so miserable and in pain after death and all. We'll come to what happens, but let's get rid of this idea first, that this is the best place that exists, and people don't have anywhere else to go. There's plenty of good stuff that happens beyond the earth, and usually it's a celebration after we go back. Okay. uh the thing is, one of the most popular questions I received was, can death be prevented or postponed? I mean, is this predestined? And well, we won't necessarily know the answer to that, but as much as I have observed with the working with people before death and working with people after death as well, my belief is no, it's not. When the time comes, you have to leave no matter what. And I have known of like first-hand accounts where people have died with zero symptoms, with no physical problems, no medical causes, even as young as 5 years old. I've seen people at 30 just drop dead for no reason. So when your time comes, you're just going to leave. The thing is, a lot of the times there is a story along with it, and we like stories. We believe that those are the core reasons why somebody is left, but really that is not my experience. When your time comes, you have to go. So can't stop it from happening. Okay. There are usually 2 or 3 gates, as I call them, that you might choose to leave or not, but that's not a conscious choice. It's not like you think, oh my god, I have 2 kids and they're just 5-year old, how are they going to manage without me? I don't want to leave right now. That's a conscious thought. On the soul level, you're like, yeah, my work is done, I came here to learn something, I'm done, I'm leaving. So you could love the children very much, but you're not going to stay. The conscious mind does not play a role in this. You can't do that. What do I mean when the time comes? I mean, it's time for you to leave. Your journey on earth is over. You're going to die, so when your time to die comes, you're going to leave. Nothing is going to stop you. Another myth I want to talk about is the idea of painful and easy death. Okay, this one is good. Who decides on that? That's a good question. Who decides when your time has come? Guess what? You do. There's nobody else sitting out there and saying, oh my God, your work is done. Okay, chop, chop, leave now. No, that's not how it works. We decide. We've come here with certain agendas. I want to do this, learn these lessons. And, when you're done, you leave. That's it. So some people come with just small portions. Some people come with very big stories. In either case, it's you who decides that, you're either done or not done. But that is at the level of the higher self, the spiritual version of you, not the conscious mind. Okay. Your higher self sees things very differently as when compared to your, lower conscious self. You're really involved in a whole lot of petty stuff when it comes to your conscious mind. The soul looks at things very differently. And yeah, so I was talking about peaceful deaths and, this myth about the whole peaceful death and the painful death. Most of us think that dying in your sleep in peace is one of the best ways to go. That's actually not the case. In a lot of cases, when you die in your sleep, you are dying in like half conscious sort of state, so you don't even realize that you've died, and it can be a lot harder to move on because you haven't had a proper transition, like a sudden accidental death or something like that, or even like a painful reaching to the end where you realize that, yeah, okay, it's time to die. You've had time to process it and had time to prepare for the fact that you will die. It is actually not a bad thing. But again, we're looking at it from a conscious perspective. We want to just die peacefully because we don't want any pain. That's not how it works. Okay. So I have a few questions. Let me see. Is it about karma that a person leaves? Um, yeah, we subconsciously, I wouldn't say we subconsciously decide how we die. It's all sort of predetermined from the past. Can you die accidentally like in movies? Sometimes, yes. Um, Honestly, I'm not completely clear on whether accidental deaths are possible. I do know, however, that when people have a very sudden accidental death, they usually come back very fast because they're too unsettled to do the, post-death process, and then they don't know, they're too attached to their lives. So they usually come back pretty quickly in case of accidents. Um, And the question about whether we die when when your karma has been completed, uh, that language is kind of, misleading. You've you've come here with an agenda. When the agenda is complete, you leave. That's it. You know. Um, Very interesting one. Can it be that we come to leave from this world in order to teach others certain lessons? Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of people, like you can ask your friend, that I want to experience going through loss, I want to experience losing someone, or I want to experience growing up as an orphan. So you can totally ask someone to be your parent and die early so that you have a certain experience. So that's also previous soul contracts. I have also heard stories I've also heard stories where people, souls have come back uh, to teach, like, for example, a couple losing their son, when he's 14 or 15. I think that's one of the most, painful things to lose a child. But they come to just teach them what it's like to experience loss because, you killed somebody they loved in a previous life or something like that. So you think, oh wow, they love me so much, but on a soul level, they were here to teach you, look, this is what loss feels like. So it's very different on the higher plane. Is murder predetermined? Yes, as much as I've read, but I haven't worked with anyone, who was murdered in now or in their previous life, so I wouldn't know from my experience. Um, and no, unless you're on the spiritual pathway, you'll rarely know consciously what you have decided. Okay, so, okay, hold your horses with some of the questions. We are going to get into all of these things. Let me go in the flow, okay? I know you're all curious. So, I was actually coming to this, that, a lot of people do choose to die early. And I also got another question from one of you asking, why do the good people die faster? And actually we were having a discussion the other day, even among our relatives, the most nasty, controlling, horrible person lived the longest. you know, it happens. Mm, well, like I said, you come here with, the agendas that you come with. Uh, what also often happens in a lot of cases is people who have reached a fair amount of detachment can sometimes have just like a little bit left, that they want to cover. So many people come here with a small agenda. So once that agenda is complete, they just leave. Also, when it comes to little children dying up to the age of 5, if a soul feels that it was born in the wrong family, they can die, they can just leave, like all the way from abortions. Up to 3 months, the soul is not really involved. But after 3 months, onwards up to 5 years, if a child is dying, usually it is because, they chose this person to be born to because of certain expectations. And when they like sign up for it later on, they're like, oh my god, this is not exactly conducive to the lessons that I want to learn right now, so I'm just leaving. And that's what happens. But after that, it's usually because they just had a small spectrum of experiences that they want to finish. So once they're done, they leave. And like I said, sometimes people can choose to be born just to die so that others are, so they help others learn what grief is like, and, um, learn some new lessons, basically grow up. Okay, so what happens before and after death? So a lot of the times, if somebody is sort of on the spiritual pathway, most people have a clue that they're going to die. A lot of people know. I actually know some people, even in my own family, and like I've heard a lot of stories of clients, family members, and stuff like that, where people knew they were going to die. There was no terminal disease or anything. They were completely healthy, but they just knew that I'm going to die. The most recent case, someone was telling me her grandmother said, no, we will not be celebrating this birthday, the coming birthday. I'm going to leave before that. And of course, nobody wants to hear stuff like that. So they're like, no, no, what are you talking about? And she ignored it. But then that was true. I think she died a week before her birthday or something like that. They did not celebrate that year's birthday, which was, I think, a special one or something like that. So in a lot of cases, people do know, and they will often close off the chapters, make their wills and, get things in order, say their goodbyes. One person I know actually called his entire family and, gave them some, I think it was a lotus or something, because that's like the thing to close off karma symbolically and stuff. So a lot of people do take action just before they're going to die when they know. Another typical symptom that death is coming, if you have delirious relatives, who are like not comatose, but half conscious in the hospital and stuff like that. And if you hear them talking to their dead relatives, like, they start saying hello mom, or hello to their grandmom, or something like, oh, the grandmom is standing there, that death is very, very nearby. Usually these people come to receive you after you die. So if you see something like that happening, you can be almost certain that it's just like within 3 days of their death. So be careful, don't say anything nasty, and just say your goodbyes nicely. However, and I think a couple of you have asked this question as well, hospitals, in my observation, can mess the timelines up. A lot of the times I can sense that the death process has begun, but once they are in hospitals, on the ventilators, they can just stretch. So then it's like the soul is like stuck, and often when we sort of send healing, the soul can move on, but not always, the relatives are open to something like that. So that's just something to keep in mind. Ventilators can stretch the process. Otherwise, it's not necessarily a long drawn thing to leave the body. And another very, very interesting question that I got was, is there a right way to leave the body? Because especially in India, we do say that, depending on how evolved you are, you're going to leave from one chakra or another. Like some people leave from the root chakra, and there have been stories of, a lot of our sages leaving from the crown chakra. And I know somebody who's actually seen someone's head having a hole when they died. They did not die of, a hammer wound or something. It was just they died, and there was a hole. There was actually a crack in the skull when they died. So when you leave from the crown chakra, that's what happens. But I wouldn't really judge it, or put a label. We have this on earth, we have this whole competitive thing, this is good and that is bad and this is better or worse. Look, it's just a journey, okay? So if you see your relative leaving from the root chakra, it's kind of weird, but when you leave from the root chakra, you'll usually just shit yourself. That happens if you're leaving from the root chakra. I actually know someone who left from there. And I mean, what's wrong with that? So what? They're just at the beginning of their journey. It's a journey, right? You begin from the root chakra, you go all the way to the crown. But it's just a part of the journey. There's no need to label it and feel bad or anything. you will leave from the chakra at where you reached. And it's not like you can complete the entire journey in one lifetime. Okay, it's going to take time. So just do your very best and you'll leave from wherever you're supposed to leave. You cannot control it, you cannot manipulate it. So, but what happens, right, when we die? So it can be painful if you're riddled with fear and we just don't know what to do. If you're not ready to leave things behind, then death can be sort of painful, but otherwise it doesn't have to be. uh, the first thing that happens when you die, and I think a lot of people with near death experiences have also experienced this, you go through a recap of a lot of almost all the memories in this life. uh, Momita is asking, is dying out of heart attack dying from the heart chakra? No. When you die, the heart stops beating. A natural death is often labeled as a heart attack by all these people. So that's just it. Most hearts at an older age, most hearts have blocks. You don't know if it's because of that itself that the heart stopped beating. So I'm not a big fan of the whole heart attack theory. For me, most heart attacks, of course, there is such a thing as a heart attack because of blocks, but most things are just normal deaths. So I wouldn't conclude that. But yeah, so the first thing you do when you die is you go through this, recap of all the memories of your life. And then there is such a thing as, like we say you go to hell or heaven, that phase does come and it depends on your attachments to things here. So if you have been very attached, you're going to stay here. And also if somebody is extremely attached to you, why do you think they say in India that if a young woman's father dies, an unmarried woman's father dies, get her married within the next year? Sounds like a crazy thing to do. Her father just died. Why not do you want to get married? And I also thought it was a crazy thing until I started meeting women whose fathers had died. And I realized none of them would let their father go at all. The father's soul was completely stuck. So the thing is, if you get her married, she's going to be distracted. She'll let her father go. That's the whole logic of it. So if, same thing happens with a lot of children that die early as well. The parents just totally refuse to let them go. The soul gets very, very stuck and cannot move on. Padmanav is asking, what about near-death experiences, basically? That's usually, it's not like they're meant to die or anything, but it's just, like sort of getting a glimpse of that situation so that they can have a life transformation. Nothing more than that. They're not meant to die. Okay. So, if you're Oh, good question. How do you know if you've stopped the soul from passing over? I guess you don't always know. When I look at the cases that I've worked with, I don't think they would have seen any signs. But yeah, I mean, what is often in common with all of these people is that these energies weigh you down. So life becomes very sluggish. Like life is a constant struggle because nothing is, see, you're completely out of the flow when you're holding someone else back from their journey. Your own journey gets held back as well. So usually if you've lost someone and after that your life has just been really lousy and nothing seems to go well, usually, and if you're really attached to that person, usually it's a sign that you're holding someone back, you know. Well, if you see someone in dreams in distress, usually they're reaching out to you for help. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're holding them back. So if you see someone in dreams, I would say usually connect with a healer and see what can be done, or a pandit or something like that, to see what can be done to help that person. So if, definitely that is a question I forgot to consider. When you get people reaching out to you in dreams, do something about it. And you can even ask them to come back in a dream and ask, what is it that you really want me to do? What can I do to help you? Um, And if you are experiencing scents or sounds or stuff like that, also, it could be them reaching out for help. So check with the healer is what I'd say. You can begin by asking them, can you tell me what you need? You know, I'm not understanding. Help me out. You need something from me. But it depends on their capacity. Are they really able to communicate with you and pass on? Because they also need a certain level of, energy to be able to do things like coming in dreams and stuff is not something that every soul can do. So if they are capable of doing that, they'll give you a clearer message. Otherwise, reach out to a healer. Okay. Now, so I was talking about what we can call the hell aspect. If you don't have very heavy attachments, if you are more attached to your happy memories, then you go through what we call the heaven phase, where you have, sort of relive. And you can, of course, have like the heaven phase happening after the hell phase as well. So you like finish off all your attachment phases. And then you go through the heaven phase where you experience all the happy memories. And, you like some of them are just running through fields, happy, wind in their hair, or eating everything they want, stuff like that. So that's the heaven version of it. Uh, and actually, after all of this, is when you go through what is called amnesia. So, I mean, it's kind of not necessarily linear, but usually after death is when you go through amnesia for about 3 months, because the shock of death is so much that you forget who you are. Now, for you, you are just this body, right? This is all you know. But for the soul, it's just one among many, 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 many stories. So you kind of forget who you are, and you kind of get mixed up with all your previous lives and your previous memories. So your son in this life could have been your mother in the previous life. And now you're like, mom, I miss mom, So it can be very confused and very mixed up for the soul. So normally we recommend, not trying to bother them at all for the first 3 months. Um, so after the amnesia is when they start moving on to other dimensions, after they've like gone through the whole what we can call the heaven and hell experiences. They start moving on to higher dimensions, going through learning lessons, meeting their teachers, and all of that. If you want to read more about this, there is a book by Michael Newton called Journey of Souls. Very, very good book. It explains everything in a lot of detail. And if you're really curious about what happens after death, read that. If you want a funnier version of this, you can read this book. I think it's available even online for free. The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. It's a very light, almost fiction type read. Journey of Souls is more serious, but the Afterlife of Billy Fingers, it's a nice but true story of a woman whose brother reached out to her after he died. Um, so it's after you go through this whole death process, moving on to the other dimensions, that a part of you can sometimes reach back and help some of the people on earth. Some of them act as spirit guides, not all of them, only if you do have a deep connection with them. Just because you miss someone does not mean that you have a very strong connection with them. That's a misconception. Actually, it is more often when the, equation is more peaceful, and a good connection usually, because you're connected with the heart, so you don't actually feel their absence so much because they are around helping you. So if you're experiencing very severe grief, chances are it is because they have completely left, and now that that's left a huge void with you. So they can come back. This is different from a soul not being able to move on at all, which is what we would call the ghosts. That happens if they haven't been able to make the journey at all and they're just stuck. And what happens in those cases is there's a short time period where you have the required help in order to move on. Now, if you're too attached to your stories on earth, then what happens is you ignore all those signs. You're like, no, I'm not ready to go. I'm not ready to go. And then that window closes. And then you have no memory that there is a possibility of going somewhere else. You have no idea how to go there. So in such cases, people can often get stuck on this plane, on the earthly plane. It's like between the earth and the energy. So when that happens, that's when you start, getting really stuck as a soul. So very often, if you're feeling scents and smells, unless, they're just trying to reassure you, it could be that they're still stuck. Okay, so, okay, here's an interesting question. You see attachment getting worse in old age with some people, and this doesn't bode well. What can be done with such people, and how does this happen? Well, see, life, we we are, you cannot be static in life. No, you have to be either moving up or down. So depending on how much work you've done on yourself, either you're going to get like more attached, or you're going to get less attached. So that just depends on the path that you've set for yourself. And unless you choose to do something about it, which is rarely the case, nobody else can help you. So you can't really help your parents or the elders in your family be more detached. What you can do if you want to help them is to really work on your own fears when you see their attachment. So deal with your own fears. That can open up the space for a lot of healing in many cases. So coming back to another topic that gets asked a lot is, can I connect with the people that have left? And honestly, I don't recommend this at all. There's a whole business created out of this. Reach out to the people that have gone, and really please don't. It doesn't help you move on. It doesn't help the soul. If they want to reach out, they'll find a way of connecting with you. And in that case, you can go to someone. Like, if they really want to connect for some or the other reason, they will make their presence known and they will ask for help. So in such a case, yes, reach out to a healer, help them out, and or communicate with them. Like, even in the case of this Billy Fingers book, you will find that he reached out to her. And there's a lot of books written by a lot of people, and you will find that they reached out to them somehow and they said, I want to connect with you. So if they want it, you say yes. Otherwise, you're just disturbing them. You're just, we're coming to the whole grieving process. You're going to realize it's just part of the denial process, and you're disturbing them, not helping them by doing this. You need to let go. The best thing you can do for someone who's dead is to let them go. Give them the space they need. They're done with this life. Let them leave. It's not easy at all, but it's what's best for them and also what's best for you. Another question I get a lot is, what can I do to help them? There's nothing you can do to help them if you're not able to help yourself first. If you're not able to let go, if you're not able to let them go, they're not going to be able to move on smoothly either. So if you're having serious trouble moving on, get therapy, get help yourself, and that will release them as well. And like I said, if they really need help from you, they'll reach out. So yeah. Next, let me just check the questions. Yes, when the dead reach out to you, that means they're still stuck. Absolutely. In case of a parent's sudden untimely death, how can we make sure that the soul has left peacefully? Very good question. It's never easy. It could be a parent, it could be a child. That's absolutely the worst I've seen. When people lose, children, it's almost impossible. That is why I said, get therapy. Look, you're not even trained to handle anger properly. We don't receive any emotional education, especially in India. I know in Scandinavia, they receive, a fair amount of emotional education. But in India, we receive zero. All you're told is don't cry, or girls cry and boys don't and stuff. Like, there's zero emotional education. You don't even know how to cope with your anger. Anger is seen as a normal thing. Shouting and breaking things is not, seen as something wrong at all. how are you going to cope with something as huge as losing a parent, or your whole idea of life is shattered? It's a big deal. It's bigger than what we would consider breaking bones. And you would go running to a doctor if you broke a bone, right? Here's your heart shattered in a couple dozen pieces, and you're just gonna wing it, cope on your own. No, you can't do that. You need help. So please get help. And it is possible to heal very rapidly, more than even I imagine. Like just 2 days ago, or is it yesterday? No, 2 days ago, someone reached out and said somebody was, really hysterical after having lost a family member just a day ago. And I was like, what? It's just one day after losing a brother. What are you expecting? But I said, let's heal anyway and see what happens. And the difference was very huge. She was just in one healing, she was significantly calmer, which was honestly surprising to me as well. So it's far more helpful than we realize. But you need help, especially given that nobody else knows how to help you either. The way relatives help is often not exactly the most ideal. Uh, okay, here's a very good question as well. What do I do if the person wanted to do something very badly, but they left? Well, they'll usually let it go. If they really want to do it, then they'll reach out in some way and let you know that there's still an unfulfilled wish that they need to, you know, get done with before they leave. Um, okay, I'm going to move on to coping with grief. So if you have any questions about the death process, you can ask me now. Uh, you're asking me reach out as in they will reach out to you either through a dream, or like the others were saying, you might get a smell of them, or something very consciously, like you'll know that they reach out when they do. One of the most common things I've seen, and this is a positive one, like if the soul has moved on and wants to reach out to you, one of the most common and easy ways for them is to just send butterflies. Like I have seen so many of my friends and peers just seeing butterflies all the time when someone moves on and wants to send a message to you that I'm doing well, don't worry about me. You see a butterfly in concrete jungle. It's really crazy. Some people see it every single day. Sometimes I know a friend who lost her dog, and the next day she saw like 30 butterflies in the middle of Bangalore in her balcony. um, do they linger as spirits? It depends. What is the significance of the last rites of the yearly and the yearly pujas? Well, it's just to sort of feed the souls. I personally don't find a huge difference with the yearly pujas anymore, especially in Kali Yuga. The last rites help because the burning of the body, especially destroying, putting the ashes in the water, destroys all elemental connections between that physical body and the soul. So there's absolutely no way they can come back. So it just makes it a lot easier for them to move on. um Shruti is asking if there's only crown and root. No, no, you can leave from all the chakras. I just gave the example of, the extremes, root and crown, but you can leave from every single chakra depending on where you're at in the journey. Uh, is death by suicide chosen by the soul? Honestly, I don't know whether it was chosen or not, but I do know that the soul can be very, very stuck for a long time after suicide. I have seen only one person so far that moved on very smoothly. And I mean, it was a very neutral death. I think that was really led by the soul. And I mean, I was shocked because I've only seen people suffering and really stuck after suicides. There is one exception that I've seen. Should the belief of the dead be respected in our last rites or ours? Well, I would say listen to your heart, you'll know. Um, does that mean they have? I don't know, Lakshmi. I'm not clear about that. If you ask me about other people, we can have a personal talk about it. Is it okay to bury or donate the body? Best to ask them before they leave, I think. But uh, How is suicide any different from choosing death? Well, what usually happens is the emotion with which you die makes a huge difference in the way your journey proceeds after that. This is why giving Reiki to someone, healing them, and there's so many groups around the world that help people die better, where there's like a whole lot of chanting. Actually, it is said that the soul hangs around for 3 days after death. So a lot of people continue the chanting even after the death for 3 days, you know. So all of these are done so that, I mean, if you die feeling peaceful and ready, your journey is very smooth and very quick. But if you die in emotional turmoil, it's going, I mean, you're going straight to hell basically, because whatever state you die in is the state you remain in, you know. So if you're like dying like that, you're going to be in that state for a long time. It can be decades and centuries actually, until, like I said, someone comes around and helps you. And that's, I don't know whether that's luck or predetermined, or I'm not sure. So if it is suicide, does the soul come back and affect the close ones they were disturbed with? I don't think so. Usually doubtful, because they've died in so much torment. They're not usually capable of, you know, disturbing other people. But that would be an individual thing you would have to see every case. What does it mean when people lie in bed for long in an unresponsive way? Well, if they have gone into coma at home, that's different. That's usually the soul probably confused whether they want to go this way or that. But in hospitals, it's very different. It's like a lot of the times what happens in hospitals is there isn't enough energy for someone to move on. So they just remain completely stuck. That's really not a good place to be. If somebody is in that situation, ask someone to send healing and they can move on very quickly. So should you dispose of all of their belongings and not use them or keep them close after death? Again, I would say listen to your heart. I wouldn't make any rules about this. You know, some things can mean a whole lot of negative energy. But you know, I mean, it really depends. Sometimes it can help. Okay, I've had a couple of questions about organ donations. I am not going to say anything because it does save lives for people, but I am not a big fan of this concept. But I don't want to talk about this publicly, so let's skip that question. Okay. Or maybe on a more private call, we'll do that. Okay, so moving on. We have 45 minutes in already, so I'm going to hurry up. If a small kid dies of murder, will they be stuck? Well, I don't know. I haven't dealt with any such cases, so I honestly have no clue. But chances are probably not, unless they were really tormented and they get stuck in that situation. I think children are sort of easier. I mean, they find it easier to move on because they can also let go. Also, I've never really come across any souls who are tormented and they're young. So so possibly they won't be that stuck. Savita, that's a really big question. I can't tackle that on this small call. Okay, so coming to coping with grief, what do you do when you lose someone you love? See, the first thing we need to really drum into our heads is life is not fair. We expect that good people will die in a very peaceful manner and bad people will die, you know, a painful, horrible death. But that's really not how life works. And one of the most favorite questions I had in the whole list was, how is one supposed to react when someone dies? But you're not supposed to do anything. You have your pain. You know, you're just supposed to feel what you're feeling and not listen to everyone who's telling you what you're supposed to feel. So the one thing I would say, if you lose someone you love, the first thing you do when you lose someone you really dearly love is draw boundaries. Tell people to back off. You need your space. Don't be afraid of being rude. If people are getting in your face, just tell them you need space to grieve. There are people who will tell you to cry. There are people who tell you to not cry. There are people who will tell you move on. I've the stories I hear in my work is just absolutely horrifying. I think the worst one is a woman who lost her fiance. It was she was in love with him. It was not an arranged marriage even. She was supposed to get married to this guy, and he dies in a motorbike accident. And 1 week later, her parents are like, "How much more are you going to cry? Aren't you done already? Come, let's find you another guy to get married." And she thought they're right. And she came to me and said, "Something is wrong with me. I'm not able to move on. My fiance just died a week ago, and I'm not able to move on." I'm like, it's 1 week. So the first thing you need to realize is you need a few months at least, especially if it's a close family member. Give yourself at least a few months to be able to move on. You're going to feel pain. It is painful, you know. And if people are telling you stuff and making you feel worse, ask them to back off kindly. Just tell them, "This is not working for me. I need my space. Please just leave me alone for now. I'll be fine, you know. And please get therapy if it's someone close to you. Now, there are many theories about the stages of grief, but my favorite one is, the simple 5 stages, and I want to talk about that. You can sometimes go through it step by step, but usually they can be like all mixed up. But I'll talk about the 5 different stages, the 5 different predominant emotions that you experience after grief. The first reaction is usually denial. You hear somebody's dead, you're like, "No, that's not possible. They cannot possibly be dead. This just cannot happen." So that's normal. So even if you've lost someone, I mean, even if you know someone who's lost someone close and they're like, "No, no, they're not dead. It's not possible. It's not possible." Remember that is completely normal. It'll pass. Give them time. One thing that you can probably make a note of is there is this sort of homeo medicine called Bach flower rescue remedy, BACH, Bach flower rescue remedy. This, just 2 drops in a glass of water can really help you calm down, even if you're like nearly hysterical after losing someone close. Okay, so just keep that in mind. It can be very useful for even all kinds of sudden emotions that are very intense, like shock after an accident, and intense anger and stuff like that. So the first step is denial, saying this hasn't happened. The other thing that you tell yourself in denial is they will come back. They'll come back in some way. They're going to be born as my baby. I'm going to try having a child so that they'll be born again. Well, no, if they want to come back, they'll make you have a baby. You don't have to. They're not going to come just because you decide to have a baby. It's their choice, and maybe they don't want to come back. But we like to project our love for them, like they love me, I love them. So of course they want to come back. No, it's very different once you're dead, And there's also all these people who really, really want to connect. And, they don't want to let go. So they want to keep connecting, get their unanswered questions answered and stuff like that. All of these come under the whole denial aspect. The next one is anger. So anger can be towards the person who's died. And this, I feel, is one of the most important things to deal with, especially if you have sudden deaths. And even more so if it's somebody who was very close, very like if it's a parent or a child, or actually even a husband, actually. So if it's a first, direct family member where you were very close and where there was a very strong relationship, there's usually a very, very strong feeling of abandonment. But the problem is, especially if we love someone, we are refusing to feel anger for someone who has died. And we don't want anyone to talk about it either, right? Like if somebody tells you, "My brother died and I'm so angry with him that he left," you're like, "No, no, no, they're dead. Don't say negative about them. Please talk about it." If you've lost someone you love, and if they left you suddenly, like, one of you was asking about father dying when you're young, or, somebody losing a child, for instance, please look at how angry you feel at them for leaving you just like that. Very important to work with this. But also, a lot of that anger actually gets misdirected at yourself, because a lot of us who have not learned how to process emotions properly are hooked up on blame. So when somebody dies, we're just like expecting it, like, yes, I need to blame someone for their death, because if and that comes to again the denial part. If I had done this, you would not have died. If you had done this, they would not have died. All this is part of the whole blame game. So depending on who you're blaming in that moment, you're going to feel anger at other people or feel anger at yourself or the doctor or something, or God. A lot of people direct their anger at God, and then they're like completely, going off and not doing anything spiritual or religious after that for years. And the only person that loses out is you, because a lot of those practices can actually help you cope better, can help you come back to normal. And when you come back to normal, you set the other person free. So by, literally abandoning everything, you're not helping anyone, including yourself and the one that's left, you know. The third phase is bargaining. And sorry, this is where this whole, if I had done this, they'll come back, they would not have died. If I had taken them to the hospital in time, or if I had gotten those tests in time, or all of these ideas, if I had done this, if I had done that, if they had done this, if their wishes had been fulfilled, if I'd reached the hospital in time, all of these ideas are just you going back into the bargaining phase, and also the whole they'll come back as so and so. All of that is also like a mix between denial and bargaining. So bargaining is you trying to get them back into your life one way or another. And then you've got depression. So once you've gone through the whole denial, and then you've gotten angry, and then you've tried bargaining, and then you realize, what, none of this is working, then you start slipping into depression, like this is just hopeless. Nothing, there's no point, they're not coming back, you know and I don't want to live, like what's the point, like everybody can die. And depression is especially when you start coming face to face with the fact that nothing is in your control. So when you realize the transience of life and how anything can happen to anyone, then you're like, then what's the point, why should I do anything at all? That's depression for you. And finally, when you pass that too, you reach acceptance, where you're like, okay, I'm just going to focus on the happy memories, going to do the best I can, and move on. The thing is, it doesn't necessarily go in steps like this. You can have all the 5 steps happening in one day. One moment you're like, it's fine, they moved on, I love them, they love me, and it's all okay. 5 minutes later, you hear a song and you're like breaking down, crying hopelessly. It's all fine. Okay. You can go through like 2 years of the acceptance phase and then suddenly just hear one song, get one smell, and then just like, have a total breakdown. It happens. um, okay. So next, one of the most important messages I want to get across to anyone who's lost anyone is please look very carefully at guilt and regret. Okay. So these are 2 of the most useless emotions. But see, the thing is, think about someone that's died that you loved very much and ask yourself, are you really okay feeling, very mild emotions towards them? When someone dies, we actually want to feel intense emotions because that's our way of connecting with them. And negative emotions are far more intense than positive emotions. So it's part of the whole bargaining. If I keep myself depressed, if I keep myself angry and hurt, and they'll come back to rescue me in some way. No, nobody's coming to rescue you. There's also this whole guilt of they have died. How am I supposed to feel happy now? Like, it's almost like you're letting them down if you're happy. But think about it. If you died, would you get a kick out of everybody feeling miserable for a year or 2 years and ruining their lives? Nobody that loves you will be happy to see you do that, you know? And more than anything else, see what happens is when they die, I told you, they go through a recap of the whole thing. So a lot of people are like, I did this, I fought with them just before they died. And, a lot of people tell me this. Like I hurt them just before they died, and they did so much for me, and I couldn't even be grateful enough in the last moments. Now think about it. Just imagine that for a moment that you were dying. Okay, you were dying. This person who is, has loved you their whole life, done a whole lot of things for you. You've been like in a hospital, and you've been bedridden and stuff. They've done everything for you. They've lost their mind sometimes because it gets too much for them to handle. And just before you were leaving, they just got angry and shouted at you, and then you die. And then you go through a recap of your whole life where you see all those amazing happy memories where they made you happy, they did things for you, where you can see their love, because after death the perspective is very different. As a human being, you only know what you see and what they do for you, but after death they actually feel, they know what space you were coming from. They see all the love. I mean, you see all the love this other person had for you. Will it still matter what small screw up they had in the last moments? They don't care, only you do, because for you that's all you see, but they're having a recap of your entire journey together, so they don't care. Okay, because this is one of the biggest challenges I found people struggling with after someone moves on. I did this, I hurt them, what do I do, how do I heal it? And I'm like, they don't care. They moved on, and you should too, because it doesn't matter to them. So the other thing I want you to just keep in mind is one simple question: is your guilt real or perceived? Like, there are cases where you're actually responsible for someone's death, not human beings. I've not worked with anyone, thankfully, who has been responsible for another human being's death. But I think absolutely the worst form of grief is when there's a real guilt involved, where you have caused the death of another living being. Usually it happens with pets, where you've fed them something thinking that this will help you, and then they just turn up dead. I've been through this as well, and I know, like, I've seen loved ones, loved human beings die and moved on. And it's taken me months and months and months to cope with this. I was just discussing with another friend the other day. She was talking about giving brandy to her parrot because it was sick, and the next day it's dead. And she said, I just couldn't move on for years, you know. Now that's real guilt. You've literally caused the death of another living being by doing something stupid. That's an absolutely horrifying emotion. But when you're using this perceived guilt, I should have taken them to the hospital, I should have been this, I should not have gone to work, all of this is perceived guilt. So very important to remember these 5 steps and categorize. If you want to be able to cope with the grief of of the loss, what really helps is the moment you have a thought, categorize it. Is this bargaining that I'm doing? Is this anger? Yeah, I think it's denial right now. Oh, this is the depression phase right now. So once you start putting a label to it, it becomes more manageable. You're like, okay, this is normal for me to go through right now. Don't take your thoughts so seriously, because you are going to have these thoughts. You're going to have thoughts that tell you nothing has gone wrong, nothing, everything is just fine the way it is. Nobody is left, everything is fine. He'll call you in the next 5 minutes. You're going to have thoughts of anger and frustration and irritation at yourself and other people. So when you have it, just label it. And then, you know, once you do that, you start creating a greater distance. And then slowly you just like, yeah, it's just a thought. I don't have to be, I don't have to be taking it so seriously. Oh, that's a very good question. How can we deal with the guilt of losing a pet in similar circumstances where we had to put it down? Get therapy, I would say. And the same thing, just realize that oh, it was something that is going to cause you guilt. Write about it, journal, get therapy. But also realize that it's normal for you to feel what you're feeling. What I have seen in a lot of cases like this is that, especially when it comes to animal, you receive like tremendous support. Like, this friend was also telling me how, for, I think I may be wrong, but I think for 10 years she had all these animals reaching out to her for all these wounded animals. She said every single day I was rescuing animals every day. And that happened after that incident of the parrot, right up to the point where something happened in her life and she was able to set herself free from the guilt of killing the parrot. She had animals to rescue every day. With me also, I don't want to talk about it, but I also had like a really special incident where I was like, oh my God, so you've forgiven me, you know? So, and that just kind of set me free. So usually if it's involving animals, you're going to feel it for a while, but I think at one point, you know, something happens and you can move on. Give yourself time is what I'd say. Hmm, good question. How about if you had to make a choice about the ventilator, keep it on or not? Well, uh, when it comes to ventilator, look, uh, usually keeping someone alive artificially is rarely healthy for the soul. Um, so it's a tough choice for sure. And again, I would fall back on listen to your heart, connect with the person, and when you get a go ahead from them, where's the guilt going to be in that case? So yeah, okay. So okay, and another aspect that I really, really want to talk about is the people who have lost someone they love after a huge period of suffering. This is sometimes one of the worst ways of losing someone because you're like, I'm glad they went. You know, I'm glad they stopped suffering. But you know what? You've still lost someone you love. Just acknowledge that. You're still going to go through the grief process after you've lost someone, and there's no need to tell yourself it's a good thing and it's wrong to grieve they're going away. The truth is it was your parent or sibling or child, and so when you lose them, you're going to have grief. Acknowledge it, give yourself the space to feel all of that, give yourself the space to acknowledge that you wanted them to continue living no matter how much pain that meant for them, and that's okay. Don't we also choose pain a lot of the times? So there's nothing wrong with that. Now, on a physical level, how does grief manifest, right? So usually grief manifests in the lungs, but it could manifest. So look at your body after you've lost someone. It gives you a great insight into what's going on inside, because it is such a huge thing. The first thing that you experience in death is often shock. Like you'll be completely normal sometimes. You've lost someone, like you're not crying, you're completely normal. And then you break down like 2 or 3 days later when it hits you that they've left. So this shock can push a lot of things inside, or even just the magnitude of the whole grief, especially if you have like little children that you have to be strong for, or weak parents that you have to be strong for. A lot of the critical emotions get suppressed and your body will tell you. So remember that if you're feeling angry, it's going to usually manifest as headaches or digestion problems or problems in the arms, hands. If you're having a lot of fear, it could manifest in the legs. Again, it could be in the belly as well, kidneys. If you're feeling overburdened by the lack of someone else's support, or you're missing their support, you're going to feel it in the shoulders. If you're not crying, if you're suppressing your tears, you're going to have like sinus issues, or could literally even be tear gland issues. Usually when it comes into the lungs, it's a sign that you have reached, in my belief, it kind of means that you're sort of reaching the final stages of the grief. So you will end up getting like a chest congestion or a severe cough or something like that. Sometimes can last for a couple of months, even where it's just like the body is getting the grief out of the system. So especially if you have learned EFT, just do EFT for the grief during those days. It'll help a lot. Okay, so I want to move on to how to help someone grieve. Any questions about what we spoke about so far, the grieving process? Oh yeah, somebody asked about what if you lose someone who you were very angry with or you had a bad relationship with? Well, usually there's just relief when somebody like that dies. And I would say don't feel guilty about feeling relieved. There's nothing wrong with feeling relieved when somebody leaves. So whatever you're feeling, just feel it. And if you feel, really shaken because you have unresolved emotions towards somebody, like, maybe you wanted to hurt them back and then they died and you're feeling just upset, like, I can't hurt you any longer, then again, I would say go for therapy, get help so that you can resolve those, difficult emotions. um, yeah, I think that's mostly it. And then, how can I help someone else grieve? Just be there for them. That's all. Don't tell them what to do, you know, except for maybe forcing them to eat when they, just don't want to eat at all. Make them soup or whatever. Take care of them, but please, please don't tell them what to feel. Don't tell them what to think. If they're crying, just sit and witness what you feel when you see them going through this. There's nothing more, beautiful than that. So just sit next to them. Ask yourself, how do I feel when I see this person in so much pain? I feel so helpless right now. So feel helpless. So when you process your own emotions sitting next to them, you actually help their bodies process their own emotions as well. It makes a huge difference, and it will help them cope with grief much faster and much more easily. Okay. And oh, yes. When you hear about someone who has died, please don't compare your own journey with them. Very, very important. Don't tell them things like it's good that they left, stuff like that. They're in a better place, one of the worst things to say. Just be gentle, tell them how you feel, like I'm really sorry for your loss. I'm here for you, more than anything else. Stop for a moment and say, how can I be there for this person, rather than how do I want to be there for this person? What do they need from me? Okay, Rashali has a good question. What do you mean by process your emotions? Sit and feel them. Don't deny them, and just sit down and, like, allow yourself to feel it very deeply without trying to make it go away, without distracting yourself, without trying to act on it. Like, if you're angry, I don't mean go and shout at someone. I mean, sit down and feel the anger and, like, take it very, very deep. See where is it in the body. How does it help them? Because we are collective beings, and your vibrations affect the other person's vibrations. Think about it like this. Suppose you're in a car and the driver bumps the car into someone else's car, and that car turns out to be full of wounds, and then they come out and they're like, now they're like, holding your driver and giving him a good shakedown and saying, oh, well, who do you think, what do you think you're doing? And you're sitting next to someone, you're freaking out now, and you look at this person and they're genuinely completely calm, and they tap you, on the thigh and say, yeah, it's okay. They're really calm. Are you going to calm down or not? Whereas now imagine this, that you look at this person like, oh my God, and they're like, calm down. It's okay. Calm down. Just don't freak out. It's okay. Calm down. Stay calm. Stay calm. Are you going to calm down? So when you process your own emotions, you lead by example. And I have done this across countries. Like, people didn't even know I was doing this, and they have stopped crying in that moment. So it's an extremely powerful practice. You need, practice to get there, but once you do it, it's really amazing. Someone is asking, my mom never comes in my dreams. What does it mean? No sign at all. Nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It means they moved on, and they don't have anything that they want to reach out to you for. So they don't have to reach out unless they need help. you know Um, okay. That kind of covers how you help someone grieve. Do you guys have any questions regarding how to help someone else grieve? I don't think I've covered everything so far. And next, this is one of my favorite questions. And how do I help someone prepare for death? A very, 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 very powerful question. When somebody is aging and they're approaching death, how are you going to help them prepare? The first thing would be to get the stigma out of it. So approach them gently, because you cannot help someone prepare unless they want to prepare for something, you know. So what you do is you very gently approach it. You're listening. You know, you cannot help anyone if you're not listening properly first. So the first thing you need to do is really find out, do they want your help in learning how to move on peacefully? If they don't, leave them alone, process your own emotions, because if you want to help someone move on peacefully, there's a chance you are invested in it in some way as well. So find out what your investment is. What is it that you're trying to get out of this whole process? And work with that first. You know, feel it, journal about it, get therapy if needed. So work with that first. Um, the second thing, once you feel that, yeah, they're open, they're willing to listen, you know, ask them how the idea of death makes them feel. Talk to them about it, read to them, educate yourself, educate them, help them understand the process. And one thing that can help a lot is talking about past events. So you would need to, sort of learn to be calm while they're sharing their stories, because if you can get them to talk about situations where there was a regret, where there was anger, you know, unresolved emotions, then you can help them finish off all those things before they die, so they, you know, approach death with a clean slate. That also reminds me, actually, one of the most common questions that I get is, why did they suffer so much? Why are they suffering? They're such good people. Why did they suffer so much before they die? Well, in my understanding, a lot of people choose suffering in their last days so that they can clear out as much karma as possible. So they begin the next life on a clean slate. So please don't judge people on how much they're suffering. It's usually a choice. Allow them to make that choice. Don't try to force them out of suffering. You know, if they're really meant to not suffer, they will usually reach out to you and ask you for help. If they're saying no to your help over and over again, leave them alone. Like, be there for them, but don't force help on them, please. um but yeah, I think that sort of covers what you can do. So there's also this process called age regression. If they're willing to do it, you can sort of take them, you know, back through their life, or go from their, you know, early years all the way till their current age, or go backwards, like what was the most painful thing in the last 10 years, you know, or 5 years, and then 10 years, and then 15 years, then 20 years, tell me about it. So, or what you can do is get them to talk relative by relative, you know. So what do you think of, dad? What do you think of mom? What do you think of so and so? You know, just get them to talk, help them release, and be present, because when you're present, you're already helping them resolve those emotions, right? The more you do that, the more easy it gets. The rest, I'm sure you can just pretty much wing it. When you start talking about it, they will be open to ask you for help as well if they feel the need. um okay, here's a few questions. This is a good one. How do we know for sure if we have overcome the grief? That's a tough one. You usually don't. Like, it takes you many years, and small portions of it will still be there. Maybe I can say that, you know, you've sort of overcome the grief when you can remember them with love, and, you know, no negative emotions associated with it. But the truth is, even after years, you can still break down and, you know, feel some of the pain. The reason why I don't want to answer this question is, it's usually the people who think they've overcome the grief who haven't overcome it at all. Because usually they're in shutdown and they're just suppressing all the emotions. It will come out later as disease, that's all, you know. Especially if you've lost someone, look at the timelines and see if some specific problems began at the time of the death or within 3 or 6 months after someone dying. That will tell you a great deal about how well you're processing the emotions. If there's been like minimal illness, then chances are, I still won't guarantee it, but chances are high that you're processing it relatively well. Okay. Um, do you think remembering someone who passed away makes it difficult for the soul? No, remembering something, there's nothing wrong with that. But how are you remembering? Are you remembering with a great deal of attachment and like I wish you were here, and, you know, you were supposed to, and I don't want you to go? And if that's the kind of remembering, yes, it's going to hinder their journey. But if it's just like a fond, loving memory, yeah, why not? You know, like, they're part of some of the happiest memories of your life, which is why you miss them. Keep your focus on the happy memories. Do proper last rites assure that the soul has moved on peacefully? They help, but they don't assure. No. There are a lot of people who get all the last rites and they're still very, very stuck. And what about collective deaths like Corona? Uh, there are huge amounts of deaths happening right now anyway. It's not necessarily COVID related. I've heard so many deaths in the last 1 month alone, and only a fraction of them are COVID deaths, you know. So there is a huge wave happening right now. It usually follows giant energetic shifts, which has happened as of, I mean, we had a huge shift in the last couple of years, but predominantly in the last 6 months or so. So that's going to make a lot of souls want to leave, you know, either because they're not receiving enough energy to survive anymore, or they want to they want a fresh start. In either case, there's a lot of people that want to leave right now, and they will leave no matter what, you know. Um, and then that's okay. So, could you talk about abortion, miscarriage, and stillbirths? Well, abortions, I haven't studied enough cases. Usually the soul does know that it's going to be aborted. Like they know what they're getting into, right? So if they're choosing a womb, they usually know that, oh, this person doesn't want this baby, and they're likely to abort it. So usually that much is known. So that's not surprising. Although it can traumatize the soul a bit. Like I know someone who was aborted by an aunt in her previous life, just before she was born as this person, and she never liked that woman. And that woman was always like, she's not even her daughter, but she's so kind to her, because that, you know, she was also acting out that guilt. Neither of them had a clue, but like after she realized, oh my god, I was, you know, aborted by this woman, and nobody knew about this story. So she was really shocked. How did you know that I had an abortion? Like nobody knew about it. So but when she found out, she could, it suddenly made sense, their equation, you know. So she'd always be like, yeah, I don't want to be near you, sort of thing, like you're a bad person. And that the mother was always like, you know, trying to overcompensate for everything, buying her gifts almost as if she was her own daughter. So those equations do continue if abortions happen. Miscarriages, like I said, see, up to 3 months you have time for a soul to sort of book the body. If nobody has booked, if the miscarriage has happened like 3 months plus minus, usually it's just because there's nobody interested. uh, but if it happens after 3 months, it's chances, like I said, you know, they have sort of decided they want to be born to you, but then they're like, oh no, this is not working out, this is not the kind of setting that I want for this life, so I'm going to quit now. That's basically what happens. Stillbirths, again, I have absolutely no idea what happens, but chances are high that that is part of the life lessons, because I mean, stillbirth is also probably one of the most traumatic things to go through, you know. So that's definitely part of your life lesson. So chances are that you have a soul contract with that soul to put you through that hell. um yes, the soul, of course, they chose the abortion, but you know, you tend to forget on this plane. um Can untimely death occur due to any curse prevailing in the family or ancestors? Yes, it is possible. How can a person in shutdown after death of a loved one be helped? The person unwilling to talk but suffering physically. You cannot help someone unless they want your help. Please remember that. Don't try. Be there for them. Resolve your own emotions. Don't try to help people that don't want your help, because it's part of their journey. They need to go through it. That's why they're asking you to back off. Um, if we are a soul and we have a journey, then how come the population is increasing? Why would it not? Like, everybody is just coming back as humans because none of the other beings are being allowed to survive properly, no? So, like, I don't really know the answer, but I mean, we can speculate. So it's just part of, like, everybody who's anybody is practically down on earth right now, you know? So, yeah. We do have a large population when it comes to soul, and there's plenty of planets to be born to. It's just the Earth's journey right now as well. So, do we really choose our parents? Yes, we definitely do. we totally choose our parents, and if they've tortured you, you've totally chosen the torture as well. So every single really difficult situation in your life was chosen by you. Now, before you guys start leaving, I would really like a photo with all of you. So would you please switch on your cameras and give me a nice smile? Okay, that's a lot of nice smiles. Oh, I love it. Okay. Oh, let me turn on the chat bit. So give me a moment. And okay, give me a nice smile now. Okay, and we're done. Oh, there's still people joining. Okay, done. So thank you.